right, our man, Tim Seanor here with the UFO Report. And I'm telling you, we are going to get heavily into Professor Gary Nolan tonight.
Oh.
Tim, welcome back to the show. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, I'm good. I can't wait for this topic. Controversial, lots of fun, exciting, groundbreaking. Let's do it.
Are you going to give us answers? Or are you going to hold off on them?
Oh, no. I have all the answers, of course, and I'm ready to distribute them freely. Here we go.
All right. Well, Ross Coulthart and Bryce Zabel did a great 1 hour, 17-minute documentary catching everybody up on ufology going back to 2017 to where we are today. And if you haven't caught the documentary yet, you need to. If you have any want, you can find it on YouTube. I believe it's called In the Know.
Need to know.
All right. Need to know. Pardon me. Thank you for correcting me on that.
And
but
it's going to be on the Australian 7 News Spotlight.
It is fantastic. It is absolutely fantastic. I actually, in between clients today, watched it. And it's very professionally done. It tells the good, the bad, everything, who's who, who's involved, who's not involved, what it's all about. It is definitely worth the freebie. It really is. But one of the people they interviewed was Stanford professor Gary Nolan. And Gary came out with a lot of really strong information in this that has set the UFO world on fire, because we love our tidbits, and even had Gary Nolan trending on Twitter for a number of hours yesterday and earlier today. So let's get right into it. What do you got here for us, Tim?
Yeah, so governments have spent years covering up UFO sightings, and a leading scientist has claimed this to be true. Nobel Prize nominee Professor Gary Nolan says that he knows that the authorities have been hiding knowledge of the extraterrestrials for decades, but feels that new public hearings will blow alien secrets wide open. Professor Nolan, an immunologist at Stanford University School of Medicine, said, and I quote, "I've spoken to people who are about to come out and whistleblow on this, and there's been an active cover-up. Proposed new laws that are awaiting approval from U.S. Congress could pave the way for open hearings into UFO sightings, where witnesses will have the chance to give evidence under oath about flying spacecraft." And so Nolan said, and I quote again, "Why is that interesting? It's not the NDAs themselves, it's the people who signed the NDAs, because that is the paper trail to the individuals and the programs in which they're associated." So Gary's pretty outspoken, and there's just scratching of the surface here with some of the things that he's been detailing lately. And he even goes into the fact that he himself is an experiencer. And so, Dave, please, I know you're pretty excited about this reveal about him, which is actually very telling as to why he's so motivated, perhaps. Please go into that.
I'm not going to lie, okay? I fist pumped and yelled out yes when I saw Gary Nolan admit that he is an experiencer. Not only do we have, UFO world out there, if you are part of it or you're on the fringe or mild curiosity, you have to realize we have of the smartest scientists in the United States, if not the world, who knows the ins and outs of how the human brain works, how everything from stem cells and everything works like that, okay, using terminology that I will never understand or know.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. He's extremely controversial too, isn't he?
He is, but let's just get to the fact for a second. Here we have somebody who knows how to study the human brain. knows what a healthy brain looks like and what isn't. Here's a man who is at one of the most prestigious universities in the United States, at Stanford, which even has, I believe, his own laboratory named after him. He has been working the last 25, 30 years on the UFO front as well. And now he comes out saying that he is an experiencer, that it started as a child, that it then went after his experiences with little gray men. He couldn't tell if it was a dream or not because Ross Coulthart asked him about that. And then he goes off saying that it happened quite a bit as a child. Then for 20 years, nothing that he knew happened until one day the Greys, or what we would perceive as the Greys, 20 years later, he walks into a library and he sees Whitley Strieber's Communion on the bookshelf. And it scared him so much that he dropped the book right there, because those were the exact same Greys that he had seen as a child, which he thought was just a dream. And then he had another encounter while visiting over in London just a few years ago. So here we have somebody who is very well versed in the UFO field, one of the top scientists when it comes to studying the brain at one of the most prestigious universities in the United States. Everybody who has an interest in ufology needs to follow every word Gary Nolan says. And Dr. Gary Nolan is dealing with some big-time people. He is big time on this. What his extent is in the UFO world, we know he is a part of Avi Loeb's Galileo project. We can assume there are other projects he is involved with. It wouldn't surprise me if he is part of the new UAPTF, or whatever the acronym is today, since they change it more than Tim changes his underwear. All right. But nonetheless, we finally have that person, Tim, that I believe when he speaks, we as a UFO public, as a UFO media, as a social media understanding, need to pay attention. Because when Gary speaks, he's dropping bombs. And it might just be, hey, this is what I had for breakfast, aliens. It might be something along those lines. But what he says actually has some validity to it every time he speaks about this subject. Unmute yourself, Tim.
Yeah, and if you beat those wasps down, I will have to change my underwear. And so hopefully I'll be wearing undies with your face on it, buddy, if that goes well.
Well, hopefully. But do you not agree that Gary Nolan right now, I think, has overtaken Luis Elizondo as the number one guy in ufology right now?
Well, he's definitely the one that is out in the limelight and making appearances and speaking on the topic, and is doing research that he is eventually, I guess, going to reveal to us. And so we are hearing some of the projects that he's been planning to work on transparently. And so hopefully we'll get some results. But I do believe that he is somebody that has been working behind the scenes for a long time. This is definitely something that, he is in the know on, and he talks about information and photographs that he's seen that he wishes could be public. So, he does drop a few bombs in this interview that he did for Spotlight 7 News in Australia with Ross Coulthart. And I would love to highlight the fact that some of the points that I feel he was making were things like the government has been lying for 75 years. And the fact that we don't have control over our airspace is probably the reason why it was originally kind of scooped under the rug and not given the truth about back 75 years ago. And so it's that ongoing lie, if you will, on this topic. And so the second point I felt he made strongly was that this cover up is also included in disinformation. And this disinformation campaign is motivated to make people think that people that have these sightings are crazy. And so I think him highlighting that fact is incredibly important coming from an experiencer, speaking for experiencers, which I think was a great highlight. Then the third point, I guess, would be the fact that he's highlighting that it's dangerously necessary not to ignore this topic. Like we can't ignore it. It's a necessary topic that the physics alone needs to be discovered and talked about. These things, we're calling it, and so far he considers it real, and that this demonstrates advanced capabilities. He considers it most likely non-human, and it displays things that we would consider intelligent. And so with that, he assumes there's some sort of consciousness that is non-material. And I think that those are some important highlights, and those are just a few. Obviously, it gets into the Wilson documents, but that's going to be perhaps for later. And I see your scowl already, but please, just on the 4 that I've hit so far, excluding the documents, what is your opinion on how strongly he proposes some of these opinions that we have yet to actually see any evidence for?
Well, you know what? Let's start off with the Wilson documents for a second,
Oh, you're reversing it. Okay.
because well, I want to make a quick point here.
Okay.
Gary Nolan and Eric Davis, who is part of the Wilson Davis documents, are very good friends.
Indeed.
And it was very nice to see Gary Nolan defend his friend publicly on this, basically explaining that Dr. Eric Davis is a brilliant scientist and a very smart and connected man. And if this was untrue, why would he have taken the notes at all? And it's such a simple question that is so mesmerizing.
Indeed. At the same rate, dissectable. And
Yes.
so in my interpretation, yes, he's vouching for him, but in that information, and I noticed that you didn't include this in your description of Eric Davis, but he's an intelligence agent, correct?
Correct.
And a scientist.
Yes.
And
As
so
most
it's an important combination, though, in this description. And so he is also somebody that is within this group of people that are on the tip of the research. So Travis Taylor, Dr. Eric Bard, Eric Davis, Lou Elizondo's in this group in Galileo Project now as well. But Gary Nolan's in there, man.
Well, we're going to continue the Gary Nolan talk when we return on Spaced Out Radio. Maybe get into a little bit of Luis Elizondo. Tim Seanor with the UFO Report is here. We love it when he's here. We'll be back with more of the UFO Report on Spaced Out Radio when we return on Plenty and So On. Hi, Dennis Banky, Raz, the voice of the gods, Mr. Eon. How are y'all? D. Ocean Swagger, how are you? Nice to see you. Oh, Matthew Gutka, how are you, man? I am grinding my teeth right now on them frickin' Wilson documents. Oh.
You're going to get to let loose. Please.
No,
Please do.
I will not publicly. I will not publicly.
So I have to wait until after the show's off radio?
Let's just say, okay, and I know Nicole Sakic is listening right now.
Yay, I love her.
Okay. At least I'm going to think that she's listening. Who knows if she actually is. All right. And I hope Grant Cameron isn't listening because I love Grant Cameron. There are certain times where you have an opportunity to break a giant story. Certain people promised me that the Wilson documents would break on SOR. So I kept tight-lipped on that for 2 months until a certain person got very, very excited and started running around booking interviews left, right, and center after he had passed them on to Richard Dolan, who got to break the story. And then Dolan and Jimmy Church, who I absolutely adore, started going nuts on the documents, and SOR got screwed. So ever since then, I have had kind of a
chapped ass.
A chapped ass is one of them. But if you've noticed listening over the last couple of years, we don't talk Wilson documents on here. The person who leaked the documents to Dolan, who then went on a media spree himself, has never discussed the Wilson documents on this show. Because I went up and down him at least in one phone conversation, at minimum 45 times. And there is a journalistic. Now, a lot of people will say, "Oh, let it go. It's been a couple of years. Get on with it, move on." But there's journalistic integrity and professionalism where a major line was crossed. And it's a story like the Wilson documents that can make or break a show. And that was our one of our chances to make it and get our name out there, and we got screwed by one of our own. And that's all I will say. So that's why when people really want to get into the Wilson documents, do I believe they're real? Yes, I do. 100%. Yes, I do. Will I go into in-depth or detail on them on here? Couldn't give two flying Fs.
Can I?
Yeah.
Can I briefly? Okay. When we start rolling again, I'll briefly hit some notes I have.
Oh, yeah, I don't mind.
Cool.
I don't mind talking about it, but
Okay.
it'll never be a major deal. It'll never be a major deal on this show because that is every time we talk about it. It's I don't want to say it's a slap in the face. I think that's childish, but it's a shot at our great listeners of SOR. It's, who deserve better than that. It's a shot at me and my professionalism. It's a shot at where we could have stood on the community. Absolutely. Grant broke the Wilson Davis documents for sure. Absolutely he did. Okay? Problem is, he just let everybody release it for him. And I don't blame Grant Cameron whatsoever. He is a hero and a mentor of mine in this field, and I owe him a lot. I do. But it's some of the people he got involved that ended up screwing us over, not Grant. Grant's good on his word. Very good on his word. Here we go, guys. We rounded third. We're headed for home tonight with little Timmy Seanor and the UFO Report. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for tuning Spaced Out Radio into your listening ears. I want to remind you that if you missed most of this show or others, check out our free archives at youtube.com/spaced out radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire. Check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. All right, we continue on talking Gary Nolan, the Wilson documents, everything going on in the UFO report with little Timmy Seanor, who is here. Tim, thank you so much for wearing my grandfather's shirt and your Howie Mandel head and look-alike glasses. Appreciate it, buddy.
Well, you know, that's just part of the gig with you. I have to come prepared. It's hard to compete with Jerry Garcia, but I try.
Hey, I will get by.
You will get. Oh, thank you. That was a beautiful quote. I love it. Love it. So digging into the Wilson documents, some really interesting quotes that Gary Nolan decided to include were a few little nuggets of information, in my opinion. And so he, as I quote here, he states that the Wilson documents are real and that he himself vouches for Eric Davis, who is not only an intelligence agent, but also a scientist. And so the two of them have worked together in the past, and so they know each other quite well. And so in these Wilson documents, in this release, what Thomas Wilson imparts in general, but also is being highlighted here by Gary Nolan, is that secret UFO reverse engineering programs were taking place in the government in the United States, and they were hiding recovered spacecraft in private aerospace corporations. And so it's interesting to see that rather large nugget of information just being dropped out there in public. Some insiders may know, some may not. Pretty interesting to put out there publicly. And so just for verification, let's consider for a moment where these documents came from. And so this was a release that was literally found within the personal effects of Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who was Apollo 14 astronaut. And so excuse me, after he passed away, this was part of his estate that was recovered, and a journalist was able to make these documents public. So the validity, I mean, could still be questionable, but these were in the estate of Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who is one of our most decorated heroes. And also, let's very quickly highlight that not only was this in his estate, but this is an astronaut who was kept under NDAs right up until the day he died. And so he wasn't able to speak about the validity of this or talk about anything. Imagine what else was in his estate. But very interesting that is the source of this document leak. Might be news to some people.
Well, it is interesting. You know, there is more. There is more coming. We have to wait on those words because according to my sources who might be chatting in the chat room right now, okay, they are saying that there is a lot more that goes into detail than just the Wilson Davis documents that confirms a lot of this news. All right. However, we're not going to get that until certain people are no longer on this planet. And when that happens or whatever, we never know. We will never know. But nonetheless, there is more to this story. We need to be able to find out. Maybe it'll come out in a different way. I don't know. But pay attention. People need to pay attention to what's happening right now. This is an ever-evolving game. It's like spinning a basketball on your pinky finger right now. You don't know where it's going to stop, where it's going to slow down, and when it's going to end. And just when you think it's slowing down, somebody else hits their hand on the ball to speed it back up again. And that's what we are dealing with. And trust me when I say this, I'm talking to a lot of UFO people over the last number of days. Everybody's confused, Tim, right now with what's going on. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm blown away by it.
Yeah, I think it's because it's starting to become more mainstream. And the fact is, disclosures happened. It's already happened in a big way. And, I
No,
think it probably, yeah. I mean, obviously, if the Pentagon is talking about this as coming from another planet or somewhere else, it's non-human. I think that this is dialogue that the public needs to be get caught up on if they don't already know. But my point is that this is definitely a rapidly increasing urgency behind the topic. We're seeing it in the public purview. And the fact is that representatives on the phenomenon like Gary Nolan are necessary, but also moving the ball rapidly forward. And I mean, if Lou Elizondo did do a forward lateral, Gary Nolan has taken the ball and is running towards the
yes, he
touchdown.
has. He has. But
Yeah.
you got to remember, though, there are a lot of blockers in front of Gary Nolan who are trying to dissuade people from listening to him, who are trying to run their own agendas on the UFO world and are not buying it and are not buying what he is saying. They're trying to, he's part of the anti-alien propaganda as well. Not Gary, but there's an anti-UFO, anti-UAP propaganda going on out there that a lot of people aren't noticing. And they are taking shots at Gary Nolan. He does have his detractors, Tim.
Yeah, and what do you think the motivations behind those detractors are? Do you think that it's black budget programs that they're trying to disguise within it? Do you think that they're just trying to say, hey, stop talking about this because these are actually ours? Or do you think it's coming from fear? Or, I mean, why are there such strong strongholds against this?
My personal belief is there are, as we talked with Frank Milburn, and as we have been talking about for the last few weeks on this show, I believe there are numerous agendas trying to figure out what they can do to get a piece of the UFO puzzle, whether it's technology, whether it's advancing in space. There's a lot of space for dollars on the line right now, or dollars for space would be
That's
the
right.
correct term.
And did you know
Okay.
that members of the Space Force are called Guardians?
Yes.
I
So
learned that today.
the point that I'm getting at here, Tim, and I could be completely wrong, okay? But I think this goes well and beyond aliens. All right. And they are using, some of these factions are using aliens and ET technology and crash retrievals as a way to garner the financial support from the US government, so that way they could start setting up their plans of what needs to happen when we start advancing in space, moving on to the moon, moving over to Mars and other collective places. I think, as I've stated before, we have a small amount of people right now, Tim, a handful of people that are conducting business behind the scenes that is going to affect 7.75 billion. It's almost communism in its way.
Interesting.
I hate to use that term. All right, I might get slapped around for using that term. However, that's what it looks like to me. I don't think we are in any disclosure whatsoever. The experiencers out there, like Gary Nolan, have a different take on this entire phenomena. That's what they're trying to bring to the table. But other people out there who've never had an experience or are afraid by it, okay, I think they are trying to kill the topic because it's going to take money away from them. And the more Fox News goes into experiencers, or Ross Coulthard and Bryce Zabel, who has incredible hair, okay, go into experiencers, the more we do, the more people start talking about their experiences, the less power that the other side has. Because remember, you have a different bunch of factions. In DC alone, you have, as Lou Elizondo has stated on this show, it's 50-50, Tim, on the supporting or non-supporting of bringing UFO confirmation, as I like to call it, to the public.
Yeah.
All right.
And
now, break down those 50%. Those on the 50% yay, well, maybe they want a piece of that space action where they could make some money. Maybe maybe we've already contacted aliens. There's that group there. You have Stephen Greer's group where everything's positive, lovey-dovey, and they're bringing candy and roses to our front door. You have Tom DeLonge's group that thinks that everything is evil and biblical, and we got to put nukes in space in order to protect ourselves with primitive weapons against an advanced colony that just traveled 23 billion light years to get here. All right. There are a lot of factions that are going on right now. And if we don't pay attention to that, we're in trouble. And that's what a lot of the smarter researchers are starting to do. And there's two of them chatting in our chat room right now. And if you want to go to our chat room, you can figure it out on your own. And I'll keep that my Quan Lin. Quan Yin.
I'm still not sure what that is, but I would love to point out that since you brought Lou up, recently in the news, Christopher Sharp has an article that was written in the Libertarian Times just yesterday that the Pentagon is admitting that this whistleblower's claim that he continues to work for the U.S. Space Force on classified topics goes on. And so the Pentagon spokesperson Susan Go has told Libertarian Times that Lou Elizondo, former director of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP, is advising the U.S. Space Force on classified topics. What a fantastic time. It kind of makes me wonder why at this point in time that's being disclosed. But one more piece of information in the pie. What's your response to this?
I have two responses to this. Number one, I love it. Is it Susan Go or Susan Goff? Up here, I think we'd pronounce it Goff.
I think either is fine. I don't think she'll mind.
Well, it's nice to see she got off Pinterest and sharing recipes to actually confirm that after she tried to ragtag Lou Elizondo's career, along with other people at the Pentagon, that finally she's admitting that he is a part of the Space Force. I think it's great. I think it adds to it. And if you look who's in that Space Force, Travis Taylor, we could probably assume safely that Dr. Gary Nolan may be in there. All right, as an advisor. All right. So the point that I'm getting at is this. I think it's great. However, the other side of me, and I may take some heat for this one, but I'll go with it. The other side of me believes it's very contradictory that our main whistleblower in Lou Elizondo, who I have no problem him making a paycheck, paying his mortgage, putting money away for college, or paying off his daughter's wedding or credit cards or whatever. I don't know how I feel about ufology's top whistleblower talking out of both sides of his mouth, where on the left, he's talking about accountability in ufology, disclosure, we need it. This is in the public's best interest. Yet on the other side of his mouth, he's part of Space Force, which is dealing with UFOs and where they're,
I can see that,
and probably where they're coming from, where they're landing, how they're getting in here. Okay. He's telling us one thing publicly, but privately, those are the conversations that we need. And you know what? Like I said, I have no problem with Lou Elizondo having a career in government. But we have to remember that means there's an agenda. There's an agenda there. And I love Lou. I will have him on the show. I will not talk ill against the man. But I do question this decision. If Space Force came up to me, or me personally, or if the Canadian Space Agency or whatever starts up here, where they finally figure out how to put their underwear on in Ottawa, and they came up to me and said, hey, would you come work for us? I'm probably done with SOR, because then I get all the real fun stuff. Probably done. But that's not going to happen. The likelihood of that happening is slim to none. I got a better chance of winning the lottery while getting attacked by a great white shark than I do of that happening. So I really don't understand how I feel about Elizondo on one side of the ledger saying, I'm a whistleblower. I'm the guy you can trust with information. I'm the guy who you can believe that I'm bringing the truth about unidentified flying objects to you, my friends in the public. But on the flip side, he turns his back to the public on the next morning because he's got to suit up and go to work for Space Force and learn more about UFOs, which is the stuff that he says he is trying to get out to the public. But he can't because of his NDAs. So that is interesting to me. And I really don't know how I feel about that. I really don't.
Yeah. I think that you kind of know what you're getting with somebody that's an agent. And we shouldn't kind of be surprised. And let me also say that my attention isn't drawn so much to Lou as to Susan Go and her motivation for putting out publicly his position or his role at Space Force, confirming that now. Whereas we were struggling all of this time just to get one little detail on his role with ATIP, and now she just off the cuff mentions it, now. That's my big red flags are kind of the motivations of that person, because this wasn't a choice by Lou, right? This was a choice by Susan Go. So that's where my mind goes. I'm very neutral when it comes to anybody that's in this field, be it you, me, or anybody. I question my own sighting, right? And so, of course, I would question an agent as to why he has so many roles. But at the same rate, I understand why he does have those roles, because he's absolutely somebody that's in the know. He should know what's going on with Galileo. He should know what's going on in Space Force. He should know what's going on with our secret weapon program and what is ours, so that he can be referred to safely as to what isn't ours, because he's obviously being looked to for answers, by all these agencies. And so, yes, he has NDAs. He can't talk about what he's being asked, and he can't infer even as to what his association is. But you can imagine this is probably his role. Now, do you have a problem with him having that role? That might be something separate. But I absolutely understand that. And Travis Taylor's demonstrating that he's doing the same thing. As the fact is, Gary Nolan is absolutely doing the same thing. So it's somebody that is on the peak of the science or in the know, a specialist, if you will, and they're being used as an associate within all of these programs that are looking for answers, including being read in on programs so they can detail it to the Pentagon and Congress.
Well, I understand that. Okay. But you can't be a voice to Congress and a voice to the people at the same time.
We may disagree there. But I do understand that there needs to be somebody that walks that line. I think that he probably does his best to do that. He's going to get scorned from both sides. No one's going to be happy. You can't please everyone, but you got to understand that's a hard role.
I
And
do.
so, he's not walking it alone anymore. He has people like Sean and
okay.
now he's got a troop that work with him.
I want to answer this in the chat room, because Angela G says Lou hasn't disclosed anything yet. I would beg to differ. And I mean this with all due respect, but Lou has given a lot of Easter eggs in every interview. And as you hear me say many times during this show and over the last number of months and years, read between the lines. I got some of my most important information in listening to Elizondo interviews just by reading between the lines. He is saying everything without saying anything. And that's that's this beautiful way that he talks.
Right.
And I love it. I love it.
Yeah. And we're seeing the other side of the coin with Gary Nolan, who talks specifically about facts and details. So having him be involved is great because he's actually coming from a totally different world where he's open about his experiences in his role. He's been very clear since the very beginning what his methods are. Now, I haven't specifically researched into any of his results, but I'm sure that's the sort of thing that he does within his peer group. And so, I mean, he's a Stanford University professor. I feel he's a great role model. He should also be, you know, teaching our younger generation that this is real and real science that can be looked into. I think that's fantastic. The same way the Galileo Project is being led by a professor who's also keeping the spirit of this endeavor alive with the young people he works with, who I believe are pretty pivotal to his work, and he's pretty public about it.